What's up, everyone? My name is Wes, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. In today's episode, I got to talk with Duluth-based singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist Nat Harvie. They released a new EP, Married in Song, towards the end of January. We got to chat about the EP, their experiments with ambient music and field recordings, their songwriting, different collaborations, and a whole lot more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Nat Harvie on the Ear Coffee Podcast. Nice to see you. How are you doing on this Tuesday morning?
I'm doing well. I'm just trying to stay warm. I'm up in Duluth right now, and it's a balmy -10 degrees.
Yeah, I think we're at -4 down here in the Twin Cities, so
I'll take it. That's tropical.
That's tropical. So just to kind of get things started, I'm guessing a lot of folks, at least here in the cities, that kind of might be drawn to the podcast have missed out on your music so far. So if you want to just do a brief introduction, kind of just tell people what you think they need to know before we get more into the releases and the songwriting and everything.
What they need to know about my catalog,
or just kind of like about like you as a artist and kind of how you would introduce yourself to someone new. If you're like, oh, you play music, and
sure,
we can keep it a little bit more brief because we'll have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I'm a Minnesota and Pacific Northwest based recording engineer and producer and songwriter and sound designer. I make a lot of sort of like minimal art pop music, and I also do a lot of experimental stuff with a variety of collaborators. I have a pretty broad catalog, but right now what I feel excited about is making a little bit of pop music.
And we'll be talking about that pop music with your new EP, which is coming out. But before we get there, whenever I talk to musicians or artists, really in any capacity, I find that they've had a very long-standing relationship with their art form, in this case, with music. So I'm interested to hear, was music a pretty core part of your life growing up, or was it something you kind of, that interest developed later on? And do you remember when or where you first really kind of connected with music on a level that would lead you to write and record, engineer, perform, do all of the things that kind of are wrapped up in the act of being a musician who's out in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely a lot of music in my house growing up. You know, my parents were fans of stuff that I think, you know, like pretty run of the mill music for your dad to be into, to get you excited about music. So there was a lot of Talking Heads and the Beatles and the Stones. There was a lot of Harry Nilsson. I'm half Canadian, and I think my dad wanted to make sure I was plenty culturally Canadian. So we had a lot of Neil Young and Katie Lang in the house growing up. I think no one else in my family is really a musician or a songwriter, and I don't really remember what attracted me to that, but I've been doing it, you know, since I was like a teenager. I think pretty run-of-the-mill trajectory. And then as far as the sort of production engineering side of my work came, you know, that I think like a lot of people, I started engineering my own albums because I couldn't afford to hire somebody when I was 17. And then I found out that I really liked that work and found that really interesting and sustaining. And I've been very lucky to be able to make that my career to some extent. So, yeah.
So when you actually first started kind of getting into songwriting and performing, when you were kind of a late teenager, what were those first experiences like? Maybe like initial bands. I did find one on there, Viviel, but that was kind of scrubbed, so we don't have to get into that.
God damn it. Okay. Let's get into it. Let's get into
Duluth
it.
podcast or something. That was like the only evidence I could find or something of the band.
Right.
But yeah, just kind of that early stuff. What Well, how did you
This
end
is
up making
gotcha
that music?
journalism. I don't know. I mean, I was with, I was with my friends, and I felt like I had something to say, which at this point, I don't know if I can really articulate what I thought that was. For me, like coming up in the Duluth scene, in the sort of like 2012, like 2014 era, like there was just a lot going on here, and Chaperone Records existed at the time. So my first music that I ever really released with that band was on this weird Duluth label, which at the time was Red Mountain, Liner Gazelle, Southwire, Charlie Parr, Retribution Gospel Choir. I mean, it was a really great it was a great roster, but it wasn't really it wasn't a label that was really doing anything. So I had sort of a strange entry to releasing music in that way, because the first thing I ever put out was on a label. Mm-hmm. And it was bad. It was really, really bad, which is why you can't find it online. But I don't know if how much I was influenced from a sort of musical aesthetic standpoint during that part of my life, but from a community of practice standpoint, I think that was a really big moment for me. I was doing high school at the university and sort of making some of my first adult friendships, and I just was trying to get into people's basements to like watch these people who were like 10 years my senior make their 4-track recordings in their basements or whatever, and so I don't know how much the actual music of that time rubbed off on me, but the experience of getting to see other people's practices, I think, was really, really life-giving and exciting and influential for me.
And just continuing from that, this music is still online. We have your first EP under your own name, which you put out, I think, sometime in like 2015, 2016. And just some of those early singles, like that EP, and then even the initial release for Nat Harvie's Birthday. Those are kind of the first releases under your own name, at least that I was able to find. So especially compared to the experience of being a part of that label, that community up in Duluth, whereas maybe the music wasn't as fulfilling, especially with hindsight. Diving into,
I wouldn't say it was unfulfilling. It was just, it's a small pond, and it's harder to recognize, yourself or peers in a community that's so small. I mean, maybe peers is the wrong word, but people who sort of aesthetically recognize what you're doing.
Like,
so it was fulfilling, but just not in a sort of
around you while
myself
you're
way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that correction. But yeah, just kind of continuing into stuff that you put out under your own name. Was that something that you were extra aware of when you were first kind of writing these initial songs that would be released on that first EP, and even the single that would end up on your first record, which we'll talk a little bit more in a moment? Just kind of how were you feeling at that time? What was your mindset going into these new songs?
Do you mean as far as my decision to go solo? For the listeners, I'm doing air quotes right now.
More kind of like on the artistic creative side, but I like in kind of what was your inspiration or mindset on that end of things, but just anything that you feel might be relevant kind of as you were transitioning into just kind of your current, releasing music under your own name and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago, and I think there's a lot that I don't remember about that time, but I think I was definitely in a moment of, of sort of trying to take sort of a left turn and maybe take things more seriously. And I think performing under and recording under my own name maybe felt more honest at the time. And I was also just my sort of aesthetic or genre leanings were changing a lot at that time. I think I was a lot more interested, especially with that EP, in making music that was like a little bit more sparse and had a little bit more headroom instead of, or was more pointed from a sort of production standpoint in a specific direction. Whereas, with we were talking about my high school band, right? So it was my first recordings. I think at the time I was just like, oh, I can record, it was less about what I was actually doing and more about sort of showing myself that I could make a recording.
Yeah, kind of like the action of actually being able to make these recordings and have them exist even just for yourself. I want to kind of approach this with kind of a lens of hindsight, especially given the kind of some of the inspirations you've mentioned for the new EP, but with your first record, your debut, Nat Harvie's Broken Record, the big first release, always very exciting and must be interesting to kind of look back on. Just with the distance of time and the benefit of some hindsight, how do you recall the time actually writing and putting together that album and those songs, some of which were a little bit older, it seems, such as Nat Harvie's Birthday, since that was released as a single, but maybe some of the other
those
songs.
songs were all recorded at the same time. That was just sort of part of how that release happened. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for a lot of that, I was like in college. I think I was, because I was living sort of not in one place all the time, I think I probably was feeling somewhat divorced from the communities of practice that I had been involved in. I think for the first time I was starting to have access to better sort of session players and collaborators. Like I think I had a lot of people on Nat Harvie's Broken Record who just really showed up for me. I mean, I didn't have label support at that time, but you can hear on the record like there's strings and horns and double bass and piano, and I had a lot of people come in for that. So I think I had this desire to sort of to bring people in and feel close to collaborators again. And I was also, experiencing a lot of sort of emotional turmoil. I was experiencing an emotional turmoil in a way that I think is special for like younger people, where some of those experiences tied to depression or being in these sort of manic states of love or loss or whatever. It's a new feeling. It feels like, it's like trying a sort of a drug or something for the first time. So I didn't feel good, but I felt excited about the experiences that I was having. And I don't know if that comes through in the record. I remember writing some of those songs. I don't remember writing some of those songs.
Again, kind of with hindsight in the mind, what is something that you kind of learned about yourself, about your creative process as an artist during the experience of putting that album together, writing, recording, and so on? What's something you learned about your kind of approach to making music? And what's another thing that if you could give yourself a few years ago, just a little bit of advice or support, what's something that you wish you knew during that?
Sure. I mean, maybe just the notion that you can't really hold it all at the same time. I mean, for Broken Record, I wrote it, I recorded it, I produced and mixed it. I didn't master it, but like I was very involved with the production of a music video that we did for that song. And I felt really in my power, I think, as a recordist. But I also felt really exhausted. And I think that if I had known at that time, how to trust collaborators, how to ask people for different things, that record would have come out really differently. But also, like, making that record is an experience that I needed to have in order to find out that it's okay to hire a mix engineer. It's okay to have someone co-produce with you or record it for you or play parts that are too hard for you to play. And I think that's a theme that's really present on Married in Song, my album that's about to come out. Or I guess it just came out for when this podcast will be released.
By the time you're hearing this, yeah. So kind of continuing to talk about collaboration, how did the collaborations of just having those people come to you and be invited in, how did that influence kind of how you were putting together the record, Nat Harvie's Broken Record? even just from like an arrangement standpoint, or even just from a more like practical, technical standpoint?
Yeah,
What
I mean,
was
I
kind of
think
that
at
like?
the time I was really into I don't know, I was really into a lot of very sort of rococo art pop. So I wanted these like grand sort of like, you know, arrangements and all these different components. And I think almost 90% probably of the session work that I had on that album was members of the Duluth band Red Mountain. And so I just dubbed all of that. I mean, I think we did, God, it's so hard to remember at this point. I think we did a pretty significant amount of live tracking the rhythm section of that. But then I would just go to these people's houses and and record the Rhodes and then the saxophone or the trombone or the stand-up bass or the choir or whatever. I mean, before the mastering phase, I'm pretty sure that album never touched a studio, like a proper recording studio. I could be wrong.
It'd almost be kind of, yeah, in like a fun way if it had no professional studio had been involved and just kind of all DIY. Moving on from there, want to talk about very briefly the Four Embraces EP and some of the kind of field recording and more kind of experimental work you've been at least releasing over the past year, starting in 2020 with that Four Embraces EP that you did with Brent Penny. That was my introduction to you and your music. So going back and listening to Broken Record and especially listening to the new EP or the new album, it was a shift. It required a shift on my part, just to be like, oh, you're covering all the different bases. This is a lot of really cool stuff happening, a lot of different spectrums. But with that EP, which was more on like it was a synth kind of ambient EP, much quieter. What was kind of the genesis behind that project and kind of diving a little bit more into that side of your artistic and recording experience, and also just working with Alan from Low for the first time on that EP, on top of obviously collaborating very closely with Brent, who I think are they in Chicago now? I think they were when I first came across the EP and you sent it over.
Brent is living in Chicago. I mean, I had always sort of done stuff like that, and I think especially like working as a recording engineer and a producer, like I've always been interested in sort of exploring these palettes. So that was stuff that I would always do, like, there was stuff that I'd done privately a lot, just at home for the sake of it. I think probably I probably learned how to program synthesizers and became interested in that from just doing like simple backgroundy stuff on some of my own work. But I don't know, I think I really, really love working with Brent. I think they're just a fantastically talented songwriter and producer. I don't know if they would want me to say producer. But Brent has really, really brilliant instincts, and I think we were having this moment of I don't know, I think our practices just felt really close at that time, and for whatever reason I was like, oh, I can release this kind of music, this can be part of the same body of work. So I just called up some people who I was interested in working with. Cole Police also plays saxophone in that album, and we were just, I mean, I think it started as us kind of just like fucking off, and then we started to develop more of a concrete vision for how we wanted that to sound, and then just did a couple little sort of sessions after the initial couple days of tracking that we did in summer 2019, I think. And yeah, I brought that to Sparhawk, and he added some guitar to that. And I don't know, it was a nice experience. It was nice to keep that sort of close to the ground and simple. And we released that as a split cassette, actually, with Holly Hansen of Zoo Animal. And and Zach Warpinski on Holly's label, Suntan Man Records, the best record label in the world.
In the world. Kind of already touched on this, but with You're Not Home as well, that was the kind of potentially ongoing series of just like field recording videos.
There's one more episode, yeah.
One more, okay. Stay tuned for that. But even more than the For Embraces, that's just kind of showing and diving more into that abstract side of things with some more collaborations, especially as a video series. So I'm kind of curious where that idea, kind of that ongoing series idea came from and what has kind of been some of the artistic and just personal reward.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it was COVID and I was bored, I guess. So You're Not Home is a ambient audiovisual field recording series that I've been working on for like 2 years. I think I did the first one in March 2020 and it was lockdown and I was going a little bit crazy and feeling kind of vain maybe, and just started making these videos, and I thought it was kind of a joke, but people seemed to, I mean, everybody was just like stuck inside, and most of my friends were stuck inside in the city and not like on Lake Superior where I was. So when I started posting that stuff, I had a lot of people reach out and say, oh, this was, this made me feel good. And, I mean, I don't know if that's why I kept doing it. I probably kept doing it because I felt good. But yeah, I had some fun collaborators in that series. I did an episode with my darling saxophone player, Cole Police, and I did one with Sparhawk where we're like in Lake Superior, like in a storm, we're like standing in the lake, and then we go in it. I was given a grant from the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council, which I'm really grateful for, to make a season 2 of that. But I don't know. I mean, it started as this sort of like aimless play, and then I think I developed sort of a vision out of it and wanted to convey this sort of notion of like a queer ecology out of that. I wanted to show like a dressed up like queer person like in in these sort of like, I guess, like ostensibly like rugged settings doing fairy shit. I'm still figuring out what it is. At one point I was like, oh, I should make a zine about this. But then I realized that what I've just said is all I have to say about it. So might need some more time on that one.
People have made zines based on lesser premises. So
fair enough.
We do love some good print media. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll see some more, at least the last episode, if not a season 2, just as that is ongoing.
Oh, expect big things.
Okay. Get subscribed to the YouTube and the Bandcamp page and everything.
Yeah, subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Like, comment.
It's going to be a blockbuster, this final ambient video. It's going to be a Blade Runner level blockbuster.
It's going to win all the awards. So let's get to kind of the main reason why we're chatting today, which is to talk about your new album. It was just released on January 28th called Married in Song. It's a return to vocally and like instrumentally driven kind of sound that you were working with on your previous album. And like I was kind of saying before, for me, this was my first time listening to, I guess, more of the quote unquote song kind of style and of that kind of music you've been making, whereas before I'd just been listening to For Embraces and that kind of stuff. So it was a very interesting, very cool introduction for me just as a listener. It was written, if I'm correct, written kind of shortly after the release of the last record, inspired by the breakup that happened in the ensuing aftermath of that. How did the songs grow from these outpourings kind of emotions, or maybe like these cathartic ideas, into the songs that we're able to listen to and really just appreciate on a very different level? Maybe not different, but on a, I guess, separate level from the initial emotions and the initial kind of ideas that you had when you were kind of first laying out these songs and exploring those feelings.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say outpouring of feelings. I think I felt really numb for a while, and my writing on this album was maybe like a way of me sort of like performing for myself, like a way of feeling. But yeah, I think that Married in Song Married in Song follows Broken Record, and Broken Record is like a love album that's really pessimistic, and I think that Married in Song is sort of a breakup album that's really optimistic. Yeah, I mean it's so when you don't have a ton of resources, the album cycle becomes really really long, and it's easy to sort of feel a lot of distance between yourself and the person or you were, the set of ideals that you held when you were making work. Like I tracked the rhythm section for this album in May 2019. So the songs feel kind of old now, but I mean this is all to say that I think a lot of it's it's like a fictionalized version of a relationship that sort of happened to me, but it's not necessarily autobiographical. It's autophenomenological. I'm like trying to write about these feelings, but I make stuff up, and it's a real sort of unreliable narrator situation. And I think like that's why I wanted to call it Married in Song, because the idea is just that the sort of the bedrock or the founding of the relationship being that a member of it is singing about it, but it's just my voice. Like it's sort of a joke of me saying, well, the body of this thing, the body of this experience is what I sang about it, but what only I sang.
Mm-hmm.
Shady.
Yeah. I think that does come across. I think it's interesting to listen to an album when you've kind of already read some or like seen some of the kind of background inspiration for like for the inspiration and everything, versus just hearing the songs out of context and just hearing them for what they are. Because I think that a lot of the themes and kind of ideas you've wanted to convey, or hopefully wanted to convey, come across, but they are still in a very direct way, but they're still kind of surrounded by a lot of like poetry and imagery, and kind of has that disconnect where it kind of is autophenomenological, and just it isn't just you, it isn't autobiographical, but it's playing with some of those emotions in I think like a poetical, not separate, but in a poetical way. I guess that's the word I'll land on. With the arrangement and kind of the composing for the music of it, this might be another question where you have to kind of try to remember, especially if a lot of this was recorded a few years ago. Even now, it's a very colorful, very vibrant release. A lot of very colorful music. So I'm curious, was that process for bringing all together these collaborators and creating all these arrangements and the instrumentation and compositions for the songs, was that a bit different from in the past, or was it a very similar kind of experience of bringing in folks and just kind of recording it DIY on their own?
No, I think it was different for sure. I mean, I think the main difference was that by the time I was working on this album, I was already, I was working professionally in studios at that point. And so like if there's a different sound, like certainly my sensibilities changed, but also like it sounds like I have resources. I hope, because I had resources on this album. I think a large part of that too was like, yeah, the people that I got to work with. I think it was very, very impactful for the sound of this album that I was working with Holly Hansen, who is from the band Zoo Animal, and just a really fantastically talented recording and mix engineer and producer. She has a studio in St. Paul called Salon, which is the only place that I will work in the Twin Cities, and a lot of other places as well. But yeah, I mean, Holly is a really trusted friend and collaborator and someone I really look up to. So to bring her on as a co-producer and an engineer was a really powerful experience. I also worked with the recording engineer Peter Bregman. It was mixed by my friend Eric Littman. It was mastered by Huntley Miller, who is very, very, very talented and was really generous with his time. And then I got to have a lot of people who I just really adore and respect play on it. I worked with the bassist Micah Tigner from the Duluth band Chase Down Blue, who's so talented. I worked with Nadia from the project Nadine, did some singing on it. Holly sings on it. Sparhawk from Low plays a little bit of guitar on it. Yeah, I was just really surrounded and held by a really, really caring and really helpful community of collaborators. I'm certainly forgetting people, but I think that comes across on the record, and I think that, you know, I feel really lucky that I was in a place, just with regard to my experience and my feelings of comfort sort of in the Minneapolis scene at that point, where I felt prepared to sort of accept the input and help of these collaborators. I mean, especially Holly. Like, I really can't overemphasize how instrumental she was in sort of enabling me to create this work.
Yeah. How did you first start working with her? Because I've seen her name floating around over the past, feels like forever, and just obviously has done a lot of work around the Twin Cities here. So I'm curious how that kind of connection, and especially such a strong and important partnership for recording and working on this record together, how that all kind of formed and how you first connected with her.
Yeah, I mean, I had followed Zoo Animal since I was a teenager, and when I put out Broken Record, we did the release show it was a weird show. I had like a 10-piece band. Oh. We did it at the Karpelis Manuscript Museum in Duluth, which is sometimes a venue, and doesn't have any, the power there is really shitty, so we were getting shocked a lot. But the bill was Alan Sparhawk played solo, Zoo Animal played, and I played. And that was actually the first time I met Holly in person. I'm not really sure how I got her to play that show because she wasn't playing out that much at the time. But we just kind of hit it off and kept in touch. And then she asked me to come sit in on the recording of her latest EP, Naive Enough, at the Hideaway in Northeast, and I got to play on that. And then you know, when I was living in the city, we were working on a lot of projects together, and I would, you know, we were just in the studio together kind of all the time, and yeah. And she's family now, you know.
This is kind of an open question, but especially thinking of Married in Song and kind of in those songs, and your experiences with them. But if you can think of one, describe a moment when you had a really special experience with your own music, like whether it was just like listening back to a first mix or getting like a certain performance opportunity and having that, or even just like anything. It could be as seemingly trivial or as grand as it needs to be, but just a moment where you, mostly as just listening to your own work, just had a really special moment and hopefully appreciated it.
I mean, the mixing of this album was like very, very iterative, and I don't think there was ever like a sort of aha moment with it. I think, especially because I was doing it remote and I do a lot of mixing myself. Like, I had a very clear vision of what I wanted. So, like, you know, I was able to communicate that to my mix engineer, and, you know, it sounded like I thought it would sound, but with a lot of sort of special, beautiful flair from his work. So, you know, there's always, I think, when you get mixes back, going to be some sort of sense of magic. But when you're, you know, inside of that work already, I think it's usually maybe a little bit less surprising. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be kind of surprising. Yeah. I don't mean to sound cynical, but I think one moment for sure was when we were tracking the vocals for Waiting Song. That was all one take. Oh. which usually I don't, I would like to think I'm an okay singer. I would hope I'm an okay singer, but I can't get a song in a take in the studio.
Yeah, it's difficult.
But I did for that song, and I just remember, I don't know, I don't need to get into the details, but just sort of watching Holly watch me, and I was like, I was a little bit out of it. I think I was, it was like the end of this kind of marathon session. And just sort of, I just learned so much that day from Holly, just in the way that she was sort of managing my energy and sort of, I mean, I don't know why I'm adverse to this term when I talk about these kinds of experiences, but like I think such an important part of being a producer is caretaking and sort of bearing witness to this thing that the artists are experiencing, and just helping them into a place of comfort and vulnerability and challenge where they can perform in the way that they need to perform. I mean, Holly just put me there in a way that, I don't know, I guess it feels kind of ineffable, but I really think I learned so much about being what it means to be a producer that day of watching her. And I hope that set of sensibilities manifests in my practice. I think it does.
Mm-hmm. Just continuing to internalize that experience and what you kind of learned and just went through with working together. Yeah.
Right. I mean, because there's a whole set of, sort of aesthetic and technical sensibilities that you need to be really, really cued into as a producer. But I think more important than that is that you're working with people, you're managing people, mm-hmm. and you need to they need to feel good if they're going to do good work. And that doesn't mean just like gassing people up. It means challenging people, and it means being honest with people and mm-hmm. and being able to read a room,
While still being hopefully supportive and kind of, contributing to the greater idea that the artist or band is trying to get across.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is kind of tangentially related, but kind of a little cherry on top for Married in Song coming out is the relaunch of Chair Kickers Union. So you're kind of back in that label element for this, or at least going forward maybe. What has it been like kind of, maybe it wasn't even as direct or as involved, but if it was, what's it been like kind of connecting with that, working with the label, working with Alan in a kind of a non-musical context, and just relaunching this pretty well-known local label that has been on hiatus for quite some time?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really good. I've known Alan for a good many years now, and he's always been really generous to me with his time, and I feel lucky to have been able to do a lot of work with him. I mean, Chair Kickers Union exists almost more in a sort of curatorial capacity than anything now, but it's been really helpful, and his support on a personal level means a lot to me, and on a professional level has definitely been generative and helped open some doors for me. I mean, what does a label do in 2022, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that whole model is sort of dying, and I think, as musicians we have so much attached to these sort of arbitrary metrics of success or legitimacy, and we think, oh yeah, if I can get on a label, then it'll be set. But like, it's just, it's a means to an end, and I think it's so much about the efficacy of that is about already understanding like what you're trying to get out of your practice, and what resources you need, and what's worth it for you in terms of that kind of relationship. So I feel really grateful for the way that Chair Kickers is is operating right now, and I would love to see some more releases come out of that. But it's not like a label that's ever been like raking in the cash or anything. But I do feel that from a Minnesota cultural standpoint, I mean, it's hugely important. I mean, one of my favorite albums from early on in that label is Haley Bonner, Size of Planets. It's a beautiful album, and it means a lot to me to be sort of attached to that legacy, but I also don't want to overemphasize what it means to
What the actual practice is.
It's not. I didn't get a $10,000 advance on this on this album. It's about community, and it's about being in a relationship, and I don't think as far as my collaborative relationship with Alan goes, I'm so happy to be working with Chair Kickers, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't sort of define my collaborative relationship with Alan, but it does mean a lot to me to be able to work with a label that has the same sort of home place as me and sort of recognizes where I come from and where he comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you use the word curatorial to kind of describe how the labels kind of operates, and where people definitely do get it misconstrued that like the label, working with label means that, everything's magically fixed and better now, because it's mostly just a means to a financial end. But I think, talking about how it's been more of a community-based approach and more just supporting each other, and kind of like that curatorial approach where it just kind of is maybe even a little stamp of support out there. But I think that, that is, I'm inclined to empathize with that. I like that when a label is able to work in that space that you kind of described with Chair Kickers. That wraps up most of my questions about the album, Married in Song. It's available wherever. I believe there are CDs for sure.
Wherever CDs are sold. No, it's, it'll be on all the digital streaming platforms. Preferably, you can find that on my Bandcamp and pay for it. And then there's a limited run of cassettes. We're doing a couple CDs. We're going to have some beautiful tote bags. Gorgeous tote bags.
Come for the tote bags, stay for the song.
12 ounce canvas. The very finest.
Very finest. It might be a little early to even be asking this, since at the time of recording, the album hasn't even come out yet. But besides the tote bags, what does the future kind of hold? What are you looking forward to working on? Do you have anything you're kind of continuing to work on and progress on besides maybe the last field recording, the last You're Not Home episode for season 1?
Yeah, I'm excited to wrap up You're Not Home, because I think it's going to be beautiful and rewarding, but also because I don't want to do it anymore. And then this early summer, I think we're waiting on a date still. I think late spring, early summer, I have an album of experimental chamber music that's going to be coming out. I don't know if I should announce the name of that yet, so I'm not going to. But it's a collaboration with Coal Police and Hillary James from Bathtub Sig, and Zach Warpinski from Kansas Plates and Miami Dolphins. And that'll be coming out on this Austin label called Arl Canyon. So I'm excited for that. And then, I have a lot of backlogged recordings. I could probably put out a full length within 8 months. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Probably. But I could, and I want to.
We'll use this as the bar. We'll hold you to it. We'll check in 8 months from now, and if there's a new album out, we'll know that it happened. But if not, then people will know.
8 months from the time that you release this podcast, and please wait like a year and a half to release this podcast.
We'll pick a date on the calendar about 18 months
Sounds
from now.
Good. Great.
So I like to end episodes in the same way, kind of like how I like starting them the same way. especially since you've been based in Duluth and are based in Duluth. I'm curious, what are some of your favorite local or maybe underappreciated artists and bands? Just if you want to give some friends some shout outs, give some recommendations.
In the
we always
scene,
love hearing stuff.
Man, Duluth bands. I kind of don't really live here, but I'll fire off a few. I'll shout out some pals. First of all, great underground band, great DIY band from Duluth. Low. They just got a Grammy nomination. Check them out.
You may have heard of them.
No, my favorite Duluth band, far and away, is Liner Gazelle. It's the longtime project of Brian Ring. He has a lot of really, really amazing albums and has been a really important mentor and friend and collaborator to me. But specifically, the Liner Gazelle self-titled album is pure dynamite. That's one of my favorite albums, as well as I Might Love You is really, really beautiful. In the cities, I mean, if you're not listening to Brent Penny, be listening to Brent Penny and expect some really amazing stuff in the future from Penny. I don't know how underground any of this stuff is, but I'm an Ice Blink diehard. Lynn and Cole are doing some really amazing stuff. Listen to Zoo Animal for sure. My favorite releases are Naive Enough and Departure. What else is good? Listen to Nadine. My favorite Nadine song is Little Self in the Garden. Who else is in the city? Shout out Bathtub Sig.
Even Double Grave coming back for
Double Grave.
Show.
We love
Friend
playing with Double
pod.
Grave on Friday. We love Double Grave. Oh, Jeremy. Oh, also Jared's Jared's not gonna fucking listen to this, but
he might. He's been on the show like 3 times.
Okay, well, let's hope Jared's listening to this so they can get mad at me for saying this. But Ghost Songs, Jeremy Warden solo EP produced by Holly Hansen featuring Zach Warpinski.
The long
the song Living Alone, very, very good shit. World ending solo on the baritone guitar or something, I think. Love Jer. Yeah, that's it. That's all the music that I listen to.
There's always more than we have time to list, so no, don't worry.
Also, you know what? Listen to Chase Down Blue. Listen to Chase Down Blue from Duluth. Get their LP on Bandcamp. It's called Red 5.
Mm-hmm.
What are some good songs on there? I Won't Forget to See. That's a beautiful song. Radio Fuzz. That's a beautiful song. And listen to me. Listen to Nat Harvie.
Check out the Bandcamp for Nat and for all these other
Tune
folks.
your
Toss them a few
dials
bucks
to
on
natharvie.bandcamp.com.
The Bandcamp Friday's back on February 4th, so if you have a little bit left over, toss some money towards the new EP.
You got something left over. Last month, I turned 26 years old, so if you want to buy my album for $26,
we are encouraging
very cute.
$26 purchases here.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, but as we said before.
Oh, and Matt Lateral. Sorry, I forgot. One more. Matt Lateral.
Okay.
Listen to People That You May Know. That's some good shit. Specifically the song Everybody Else. Very nice.
Okay. We good?
Yeah, I'm good.
I think that
don't let me do anymore.
That'll keep people busy with their adding stuff for their Bandcamp want lists and checking stuff out.
One can hope.
One can hope.
And honestly, Joffrey Lamar Wilson, incredibly talented saxophonist, really great songwriter, overall beautiful man. Love his stuff.
All right, we'll add that to the list as well. Yeah.
One more, Wes. I got one more.
Okay, I'm cutting you off after this.
Okay, check out Tenderness. That's Tenderness, the project of homosexual powerhouse Peter Wittrak, destroyer of worlds, beautiful man, 100 feet tall, incredible voice, unstoppable vision, beautiful, 10 out of 10, chef's kiss.
If only because of their reputation as a 100-foot tall destroyer of worlds, I think it merits a listen or two.
Yeah, but in like a graceful way, in like a really beautiful, graceful,
a graceful
manner.
destroyer of worlds. There's got to be something in there.
Yes.
Yeah, check out the EP or the. Would you classify it as an EP or an album? I probably should have asked this before.
You didn't ask me this, but I was calling it an album. I
kind of
from
kept
an
correcting
austerity
myself. My brain
standpoint right
told
now,
me EP.
I don't give a shit. You can call it whatever you want, but let's just, if it's over 6 songs arbitrarily, I'm gonna call it an album. Who can fucking afford to make a full length album and not get bored at the same time anymore? I'm not that prolific, and I'm too fickle, so I'm gonna call it an album.
Okay, it's an album. We'll you heard it here. Regardless of how you describe it, it is available on Bandcamp and any other streaming platforms. Definitely check it out. It's well worth your time. Thank you so much for bearing with me and chatting this morning and being flexible as we finally were able to get a time to chat on the calendar.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. It's been a delight.
The Ear Coffee Podcast is a companion to the blog of the same name. If you like this episode, please leave us a rate and review so we can stand out among the other music podcasts. You can follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Ear Coffee. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.